Good evening, everybody. I am Anant Chintalapalli, editor at Hyderabad Book Trust. This is a book release webinar. A book written by a woman activist. It's called A Prison Notes by a Woman Activist, published by Ratna Books in English. Anuradha garu, woman activist, నాకు చాలా కాలంగా పరిచయం. చైతన్య మహిళా స్రవంతి నుంచి పరిచయం. ఈ సాయంత్రము ఈ వెబినార్ బైలింగ్వల్ గా నడుస్తుంది, బోత్ ఇన్ ఇంగ్లీష్ అండ్ తెలుగు. ఈ బుక్ రిలీజ్ వెబినార్ ని అధ్యక్షత వహిస్తున్నది ఉమా చక్రవర్తి గారు, హిస్టోరియన్. అలాగే ఈ ప్యానెల్లో మాట్లాడుతున్నటువంటి ఈ బుక్ రిలీజ్ కి సంబంధించి మాట్లాడుతున్నటువంటి వక్తలు బాలాజీ ఉట్ల బాలాజీ గారు కూడా నాకు 1997-98 నుంచి పరిచయం. వారు సత్యంలో పనిచేస్తున్నప్పుడు, బైరాజు ఫౌండేషన్ లో పనిచేస్తున్నప్పుడు నుంచి పరిచయం నాకు. వారు బిహేవియరల్ ఎక్స్పర్ట్, కమ్యూనికేషన్ ఎక్స్పర్ట్. తర్వాత ఆదిత్య కొర్రపాటి యంగ్, very energetic and versatile thinker, versatile writer, literary critic, freelance translator. అలాగే దేవాంగన కలిత తనను తాను ఎట్లా పరిచయం చేసుకుంటుంది అంటే స్టూడెంట్, ఉమెన్, హ్యూమన్ రైట్స్ డిఫెండర్ అని పరిచయం చేసుకుంటుంటారు. ఈ వెబినార్ స్టార్ట్ కాకముందు డ్రై రన్ చేస్తున్నప్పుడు అనురాధ అండ్ దేవాంగన ఇద్దరు వాళ్ళ జైలు జీవితాల గురించి మాట్లాడుకుంటున్నారు. వాళ్ళు ఎన్ని కాన్స్పిరసీ కేసుల్లో వాళ్ళు అరెస్ట్ చేయబడ్డారు. 4 కేసుల్లో నేను అరెస్ట్ చేయబడ్డాను అని దేవాంగన కలిత చెబుతుంటే, ఏ కేసులని డీటెయిల్స్ అడుగుతుంటే అనురాధ, నేను విన్నాను డ్రై రన్ లో. జస్ట్ ఈ వెబినార్ ముందు మేము డ్రై రన్ చేస్తున్నప్పుడు మైక్ చెక్ చేసుకోవడానికి, ఫ్రేమ్ చెక్ చేసుకోవడానికి మేము చూస్తున్నప్పుడు వాళ్ళు మాట్లాడినటువంటి క్యాజువల్ టాక్స్ లో ఇద్దరు యంగ్ ఉమెన్ వర్ టాకింగ్ అబౌట్ దైర్ జైల్ ఎక్స్పీరియన్సెస్ అండ్ దైర్ ప్రిజన్ ఎక్స్పీరియన్సెస్ అండ్ దైర్ కేసెస్ అండ్ కాన్స్పిరసీ కేసెస్ they were booked under. So Devangana Kalita is the other panelist speaker. Anuradha B is an author, and she will also talk at the end of the webinar as author's response. Gita Ramaswamy might not be talking today, but she is actually she's not well. She will participate in the webinar. So with this brief note to this webinar, bilingual webinar, I want Uma Chakravarthy ji to take over the mic. Thank you.
So good evening. Sabko salam and greetings to everyone. This is a unusual book launch because there are not that many people who are writing about their jail time. Although it was not unusual to write about your jail time in the past, but it was also because there were larger number of women who went to jail in the past in certain times. This has become slightly unusual. Not that people have stopped going to jail. Women are going to jail all the time for a whole series of things which we may describe as non-political, but there's nothing non-political in life. So actually, it has waited so long for us to now suddenly recognize that the jail is a certain kind of space, and what it means to be in it, and how how one's personal beliefs and actions can be criminalized. But more than that, what it means to be in that space. There's been a lot of excitement recently because of the pandemic. So there was a high power committee that was set up, and it was meant to be creating a certain environment in which the COVID did not spread. And what was unusual is that it made no difference at all, because neither was the overcrowding reduced. And in a sense, I was irritated because I felt that actually what needs to be addressed is the jail itself, the running of the jail itself. Why it's made such an inhumane place, for me, is the more important issue. And for a variety of reasons, jails have become part of my thinking, because I've done a series of interviews with women who went to jail over a period of time. And I now can see myself as something of an expert on the subject, because I've collected so many stories. I first met Anuradha through one of her short stories, which was published in a collection. I think it was the one on the Paro's kids, which was in a collection that had come out. So I first came across Anuradha there. Later on, I went on to actually interview Anuradha also for the film and book that I hope to be doing on the basis of this. And of course, there are people here. I mean, there's Devangana, and both Natasha and Devangana are people whom I've known and whose jail time I have watched, because it's all happening. That drama was unfolding before us. And these were students who used to drag me into their events on various things, Pinjra Tod mostly, and then they got into a Pinjra of another kind. And, so they tried to come out of one Pinjra, and they were put into another Pinjra. Let me just make a few preliminary comments on this. I've been struck by the fact that women writing their jail experiences has been very varied. I'm not sure that it's distinctively different, but it seems to me it's different from men writing about their jail time. Sometimes men, write about their memoirs in a general sort of way, and in that perhaps their jail time comes in. I have read one jail account, which is at Ramchandra, which Singh, which is a nice moving account. That what is interesting to me about the jail, about women, is that they sometimes write about their jail time not directly, but indirectly through the vignettes or through the accounts that they assemble of women that they have met, women that they have come across in the jail. And some of it is, now I wonder why, I'm not sure why this happens. For instance, Meenakshi Sen, I don't know if you people know her. Unfortunately, her book does not exist in English. But her book is called Jailer Bhitar Jail, which is the jail within the jail. And that's typically the structure of the jail, is that the women's jail is placed inside the larger jail. It's like, and so there are a whole series of vignettes that she draws of people who were incarcerated, ordinary women who, and it's a deeply political issue, because the women who are there are often there for things that they don't even know are criminal or will be regarded as criminal. And in one little account, Safura was describing that there was a woman in the jail who was charged with having stolen 20 rupees. And extraordinarily, the bail that it was 8 years, she was in jail for 8 years. The bail that has been set for her is 20,000 rupees. She can never come out. This is a woman who will never be able to come out on bail. So, it's how political incarceration itself is, to my mind, is something that's captured by some of these women. And in one of the very moving accounts that has been translated into English from Meenakshi Sen's writing, is an account of a woman who is not right in the head. I don't know if many of you know this, but there was a time when when women particularly women who were not, who had been unhinged or were suffering from some form of quote unquote madness, were also placed in the jail along with everybody else. And it's the most, so one of her most powerful accounts is of a woman called Asgari Begum, a poor woman, older woman, who's desperately, who is also got tuberculosis. She just wants to go and sit in the sun for a few hours, and she never gets to get that opportunity. So she dies without actually, and she dies finally, you know. And this is a beautiful story that it's, and when I say story, I don't mean they are stories, because they're actual incidents. They're actually about women who have been incarcerated. So I think that there's what's really interesting is that the accounts of other women who are there for a variety of reasons, and you know, quite often it's the larger patriarchy that is responsible for all these criminal women being incarcerated. So there's a very rich way in which women have engaged with this, and I'm struck by the fact that some of the most moving accounts of the jail is not their is not the jailed person's, imprisoned person's own experiences, but very often actually the experiences of other women, and the manner in which. So Jayamitra's Killing Days, for instance, it's a it slips in and out between, it moves between her own account of how she reaches jail, what's happening, how she's transferred from one place to another, and so on. Actually watching other women, so that in one of the films that I made on the period 67 to 77, I was able to actually use the jail, her account of jail, as a kind of archive, because you could actually see the manner in which she observes and writes very, very movingly in it. But she also writes about these very everyday women. And as women leave the jail, and I'm sure Devangana will have had this experience, they often say, as the political prisoner is leaving, they often call out to them and say, "You won't forget us, will you? Will you forget us?" I mean, because it's like they've established a very powerful connection inside the jail. And I'm reminded of Stan Swamy. One of his accounts is that he said humanity is throbbing inside the jail, and that's actually very powerful also, as far as I'm concerned. So Anuradha's book, finally I did manage to read the whole of it, all the stories in it, and I'll just leave you with the fact that one of the very interesting accounts that she gives is of being, because she's in the jail in Jharkhand, there is a tree, the jackfruit tree is the tree that has witnessed history over 30-40 year period. It's the tree under which Mary Tyler sat, and it's the tree under which Anuradha also sits. So there's a continuity of experience through the way the tree itself has stayed, and the excitement that the jail staff feels when they understand from Anuradha that she has read Mary Tyler's book, and in an interesting, ironical way, so much is not allowed to you in the jail, but in the Jharkhand jail, they actually have copies of Mary Tyler's book. And that, I think, is very exciting, because we know from the accounts of people who are in, that they're often not accessing material which they would like to, the library is probably sanitized and kept with as little quote unquote political stuff. So so in a sense, I think that history being borne out, generations of women going in, and that connection that exists is among the things that Anuradha has written about. So I think that we should have more and more of these writings, and not more and more people to go to jail, but more and more people to write about it, to write when they have gone. And with these remarks, I'll proceed with the rest of the session. So can I invite now the, what is the order that we are following? Let's just follow the order that's listed in the book. And I hope that my English has been simple enough for even the Telugu speakers to understand. I don't speak in very complicated ways, so I hope they've understood, and the bilingual spirit is being maintained. So let's have our next speaker. It's one of the translators, I think. Can I invite, please, Balaji? Please unmute and do tell us your, give us an idea of the process of translation and so on.
Yeah, first of all, I must thank Anuradha Garu for writing this book, and it gave an opportunity for me to translate the story. Alage Gita Ramaswamy Garu, she's the one who had insisted that I translate something. I'm not a professional translator or anything. I did journalism long ago. My father was a journalist and my mother is a writer and all. So language is something that came to us, and incidentally that she suggested, why don't you translate something? So like many things in life, accidents happen, and this is another accident, and I'm so happy for it. Basically, Hyderabadi mein कहते हैं बेगाने के शादी में अब्दुल्ला दीवाना. So ये दखनी में बोलते हैं. Among all these stalwarts who have been activists and then who have suffered much and then who worked for causes and who have stood for something and they had the courage of conviction, I'm just reminded of an interesting sloka of Bhartrihari, both in Sanskrit and as well as Telugu. Visheshatah sarva vidam samaje vibhushanam maunam apanditanam. Sakala vidulagu sujanula sabalalona mauname vibhushanama మూఢ మానవులకని. అయినా కానీ ఏంటంటే అప్పుడప్పుడు దుస్సాహసం చేస్తుంటాను. ఎందుకనంటే గీత గారు, శశి గారు వీళ్ళందరూ కూడా ఏదో చూడడానికి వెళ్తే నీళ్ళలో దోసినట్లు అప్పుడప్పుడు పడిపోతాను. కానీ సంతోషం ఏంటంటే ఐ వాస్ సో హ్యాపీ టు హ్యావ్ ట్రాన్స్లేటెడ్ దిస్ వన్ ఆఫ్ ది స్టోరీస్. I had read many of the stories and I was planning to translate some, and I was caught in, I was working in an organization. I was heading a healthcare organization, and it came around the time, and by the time I could select, I think hotcakes go off the baker's shop. Every day Gita would send saying that this story, somebody has already agreed to do this story. By the time I realized that I'm going to translate this, I like this story, it would have gone somewhere. So it doesn't really matter. There is something called Edi Praptam Ade Aitadani. So I'm not a fatalist. I'm not saying that, but Providence had it that one of the stories that I could translate. I do keep translating a lot of stuff from English and Hindi, whether it's poetry or some essays, into Telugu, especially for some of my friends who are from rural areas, who are my classmates and who don't have the facility of either Hindi or English for that matter. For example, that Shav Vahini Ganga is something that moved me. So I translated that or transliterated that. And I didn't like the Telugu translation that came. It was very literal. So one of the key things when we translate is how do we do justice to the author without losing out the flavor and the essence of what they're trying to say. It isn't an easy thing. You got to put yourself in the shoes of that person, experience that. And then you have to have the facility of both the languages. And then what works very well as an expression or an idiom. For example, in Telugu, there may not be an equivalent expression in English. For example, Telugu, there is a word called mohamatam. There is no equivalent in English or anywhere else. I haven't found that. Momata padadu, they say. In Hindi, we say Sharmana mat. So that's not exactly equivalent. Sigu padadu is the exact translation in Telugu. But Mohamatam is not exactly, probably Maharashtrians have it in some way. So translation has its own challenges. But that doesn't bother me much as long as the translation doesn't take away the core of the story and the emotion that is there and what is being expressed by the author. So I'm thankful for to have translated that, and I hope my English was decent enough, because I studied in a vernacular medium, Telugu medium. So English is the foreign language. To the extent that I could write something, I did translate that. But more than from a translator's perspective, one of the concerns that I've had being a layperson, like I said, I'm neither an activist nor am I a social reformer or change leaders like many of you are. But one of the things that I've seen when I was very young, I was in student politics, I always found one, that in most of the meetings that I went to, typically it is the same group of people keep appearing all the time. So one of the concerns and challenges that I expressed with Gita, saying that thing, are we preaching the choir? అంటే ఆల్రెడీ మతం పుచ్చినోడికి పుచ్చుకున్నోడికి మళ్ళీ మతం చెప్తున్నామా? So there's no need to convert. So that way, bringing it into English probably will give a much larger audience, and more people could reach out. We could reach out more people, and that's the idea. So the key question is, how do we make something accessible to a large number of people and bring them into the mainstream? Otherwise, these ideas look very esoteric. These look like typically nowadays in the climate that we are in, anytime we comment like this, we are called secular, we are called liptards, all kinds of nice epithets that people gave. అన్ని రకాల పేర్లు పెట్టి పిలుస్తారు. అయితే ఏంటంటే ప్రజలకి యాక్సెసిబుల్గా ఉంటుందా, అంటే వాళ్ళకి రీచ్లో ఉంటుందా, ఎట్లా దాన్ని మనం తీసుకెళ్తాం అనేది ఇష్యూ. భాష ఒకటి, భాషనే కాకుండా వేరే విధాలుగా మనం చేయొచ్చా? ఈరోజు ఇవాళ రేపు ఎవరు కూడా చదివే ఓపిక లేదు. దేర్ ఇస్ నో పేషెన్స్ ఫర్ పీపుల్ టు రీడ్. సో ద రీడింగ్ కల్చర్ ఇస్ సిగ్నిఫికెంట్లీ కమింగ్ డౌన్, అండ్ పీపుల్ go for a lot more podcasts. And I'm so happy that thanks to COVID or whatever, I think we are getting into a Zoom meeting kind of thing. It's a very technology oriented virtual kind of thing, but also it leaves a record for a lot of people who don't have an opportunity to read, or don't have an aptitude to read or habit of reading. Listening to something might goad them into reading something. Sometimes I listen to friends, normally Shashi kind of thing. I say, hey, what is the latest book that you're reading? What did you like? He'll give some short brief of the book or something of that kind. If I like it, then I order it and then read it myself. So I think, can we use multi-modal kind of mechanisms to reach out people? I'm not saying the medium is the message, but medium is a very, very important thing as to how do we reach. So the conventional medium like the book, etc., will stay forever. But I think if you want to reach a large number of people and influence them, one of the key things that I believe is whenever an author gets this urge to write, ఈ రాయాలని మనసులో నుంచి బయటకు వచ్చినప్పుడు, అందరికీ రాదు కదా, చాలా మంది జైల్లో ఉండొచ్చు కాక, అందరికీ రాయాలని రాదు, రాయగలిగిన వాళ్ళు కూడా రాయలేకపోవచ్చు, రాయాలని ఇంట్రెస్ట్ కూడా లేకపోవచ్చు. కానీ వాళ్ళకి ఆ లోపల నుంచి వచ్చింది అని అంటే ఒక ఆడియన్స్ని రీచ్ కావాలి, ఇక్కడ జరుగుతున్నది నా కళ్ళతోని వాళ్ళు చూస్తే బాగుంటుంది, ఇంకోటి కూడా ఎక్స్పీరియన్స్ ఇవ్వాలన్న ఆలోచనతోనే రాసి ఉంటారు. అట్లా ఉన్నప్పుడు, సో హౌ డు వి రీచ్ అవుట్ టు అ లార్జర్ ఆడియన్స్, and how do we reach out to different people who normally don't have access to books? That is where I come from. I'm coming from. I thought I'll just share this in this group, so that many of these stories don't become an echo chamber in which that we talk to each other and we all know, we empathize. It's always a handful of people who will transform the world. Definitely true, but definitely how do we reach to large number of people who can come and then see this part of it, which Dr. Chakravarthy did talk about nicely, saying that the key question is not so much as women's memoirs and other kinds of stuff. The question is, why are women going to jail? ఎందుకు వెళ్తున్నారు జైలుకి? ఈ ప్యాట్రియార్కీ అంటే పితృస్వామ్య పరిస్థితుల్లో మనం ఉన్నాం, దీన్ని ఎట్లా మార్చాలి, అది కూడా ప్రశ్నలు ఉన్నాయి, లార్జర్ క్వశ్చన్స్ ఉన్నాయి. అవి ఆ ప్రశ్నలన్నిటికీ ప్రజలకి దగ్గర పోవాలి. అది ఎట్లా పోతుంది అన్నది ఒక ఆలోచన. దాన్ని పుస్తకం అన్నది ఒక మీడియము. ఇప్పుడు మా దగ్గర అంటుండే పుస్తకం నడవకపోతే మస్తకం నడుస్తుంది, మస్తకం నడవకపోతే పుస్తకం నడుస్తుంది. సో పీపుల్ హూ కాంట్ కీప్ ఇట్ ఇన్ ద మైండ్, దే రైట్ ఇట్, అండ్ పీపుల్ హూ కాంట్ రైట్ కీప్ ఇట్ ఇన్ ద మైండ్. సో ది క్వశ్చన్ ఈస్, how do we use multi-modal ways of taking these ideas outside? And I was very, very touched by the humanity that I could see through the eyes of Anuradha garu. ఆవిడ కళ్ళలో నుంచి జైల్లో ఉన్న ది కండిషన్, హ్యూమన్ కండిషన్ ఏదైతే అంటారో, మీరు జైల్లో ఉండొచ్చు, బయట ఉండొచ్చు. ఎస్పెషల్లీ నేను ట్రాన్స్లేట్ చేసింది ఏది జైలు అన్నది. సో ఇట్ ఈస్ ఒక రకమైన 2 parallel tracks మీద. ఇది జార్జ్ లూయి బోర్గెస్ ది ఒక బుక్ ఉండే, ఎట్లాగైతే 2 parallel universes లో ఎట్లా నడుస్తుందో అట్లా అనిపించింది నాకు కదా. అంటే ఇట్స్ లైక్ దాని ఏమంటారు, దాన్ని సెల్ఫ్ రిఫరెన్షియల్ థింగ్ లాగా ఉండే. యాక్చువల్ జైలు లోపల ఉందా, హస్బెండ్ జైల్లో ఉన్నాడా, బయట ఉంది, హూ ఇస్ ఫ్రీ, ఇద్దరు బయట, హూస్ ఫ్రీ, హూస్ నాట్, వాట్స్ జైల్ అని. It's a very, very deep story. I felt very touched by that, and I also felt at the structure of it, how it was presented and asking the question. It's a very short story and a simple, an ordinary woman's struggle with her husband and her in-laws and all of that, for which she was in jail. So my question is, my invitation to Ratna Books or HPT or the rest of the people is, can we take these things as a next step after we launch this book? Maybe a graphic novel kind of a thing is easy for people to read, for some of them, if not all stories. I know it takes a lot to build one, or a podcast kind of a thing by Anuradha garu or other people. That might not be a bad idea to take this forward, is what I thought. I'll stop at this point of time. Maybe if there are any questions or anything, I could take it later. Thank you very much, Dr. Ma and Anand.
Thank you very much, Balaji. Let's now have our second speaker, and then we'll go to Devangana.
Madam, to keep the bilingual spirit, we go to Devangana first and then to Aditya Korrapati.
Surely. Yes, all right, Devangana. We'll keep the bilingual spirit.
Actually, trilingual. हिंदी కూడా కదా,
हिंदी भी बोल सकते हैं, बिल्कुल हिंदी बोल सकते हैं. खास करके अगर आप हैदराबादी हिंदी बोल सकते हैं तो बहुत ही
दक्षिणी बोल सकते हैं.
दक्षिणी में बात करते हैं, दक्षिणी जो कहते हैं.
Okay. Yeah, greetings to everyone. And firstly, I'm really grateful to the organizers. It was Gita who called me to invite me for this session. And really, I think it was just a book that I had been just waiting to read since coming out of prison, because I think, as Uma also earlier described, that the prison as a space, because of the nature in which it brutalizes and dehumanizes everything, it's the relationships and the collectivity that you form with one another, with co-prisoners, sometimes maybe even with some junior level staff, that really helps you to kind of survive that space. And that's why, actually, I think in the first 1 or 2 weeks since our release, one of the things, everything seemed so destabilizing and disorienting because of not being able to come to terms with the pain of the separation, particularly from our co-inmate Gul and other people, and these bonds that we build in prison. So suddenly to actually find this book, and there was this it was quite an intense experience of kind of both it being really revealing and as well as familiar. So I think personally for me also, reading the book was quite an emotional experience, where one found oneself crying and laughing together at various points. So yeah, firstly, I'm very grateful to Anuradha for writing these books and writing these stories in this kind of such moving and empathic ways. And it's just, you felt like, every woman, every child, almost every situation and experience that she was describing, and that kind of, existing inside that space, and this almost at least for us, this unexpected sense of collectivity that one finds, which maybe actually when Uma was talking earlier, that why is it that when women prisoners write about the prison, they often write so much through the lens of the experiences and lives of other women around them also. So like that made me think that maybe it is because you also form such strong bonds with the people that you live with in your barracks and in your wards that it's difficult to imagine writing something without them being all around you in that writing. So yeah, and the way in some sense, you know, like Anuradha brings out this really in this moving ways, these shattering and devastating experiences of Crow prisoners, majority of whom, which also reflects to our own experience, come from marginalized communities, come from Dalit, Adivasi, and Muslim communities. So the very conditions and circumstances which have kind of brought them to that space, and as well as within that, how she herself is a participant and a witness to, even in a space as dehumanizing and brutalizing as the prison, how they are kind of able to find and create conditions of resilience, of resistance, of survival, of creativity and autonomy in some ways, you know, when you are like, you know, trying to find this book, when you are hiding and finding all these really crazy ways to cook food, something as basic as that. And how in that sense, for me, I think, which was particularly also impactful and effective, like in this, the affect it created in me was this sense of the life that people come to build inside prison as well, despite this intense conditions of surveillance, of brutality, and where in some sense the extraordinary becomes ordinary, in the sense that you go to court visits, you go for trials, and like children's lives become about playing, like, you know, search ki main aapka searching karunga, or like meri rihai ho rahi hai, and they will take bags and they go, or like court, they talk about court visits, or they talk about bail. So that becomes normalized, and in some sense what is quote unquote the normal becomes extraordinary inside prison. So it's like to just have a tree outside your ward that you can sit under, or the fact that children in jail have never seen a dog or have never seen a cow or don't get a chance to see the moon. And but because Anuradha, in the book, the first story is about, it's called Baby's Day Out. It is about children first witnessing the outside world. And we used to live in the children's ward, and the children formed a very integral part of our everyday existence. And sometimes the questions that they used to ask would bring out the stark, like, brutality and inhumanness of the system. So like, you know, like for instance, I remember this one child whom I was particularly very close to, and one day we were just sitting outside looking at like these birds flying, and suddenly he goes to me and asks like, Devangana, Asman kahan se aata hai? So I was for a moment so perplexed, like, you know, where does the sky come from? And how do I tell him that, you know, someone who has for the beginning 2 years of his life only lived inside prison, how do I tell him there is a whole universe out there where there is the Asman? And even before I could answer him, he asks me, to Asman ghar se aata hai kya? Like, so this idea of the home itself also being this kind of elusive thing, yet knowing that, you know, how our own homes are such complicated kind of spaces. And once he finally realized that, okay, to get out of this space, you need to get out of jail. So he like, all children had these plastic bats or badminton rackets to play with. So he would just go around the jail, like banging in every surface. And people would be like, you know, Laddu, what are you doing? And he'll be like, you know, main jail tod raha hu. This is how I can get out. And then people would joke कि देखो तुम्हारा पिंजरा तोड़ वाले लोग यही भी आ गए, जेल तोड़ने लग गए बच्चे. Or things like, because Gul used to teach in the creche, and then obviously one was interacting with these children, so they would pick up things which we were saying. And one day the superintendent came for round, And she asked, "Acha bacho, to tumne kya sikha hai abhi tak?" And suddenly, and we hadn't even taught them specifically those things, but the kids just started giving azadi slogans. Hum kya chahte hain? Azadi. Cheen ke denge azadi. And it turned out one of the new kids who had come, who was slightly older, she had like, and her mother used to live on the street, so she had been like constantly there for 2 months in the Shaheen Bagh protests, and that's how she knew the slogans. So yeah, so it is there are just so many kind of experiences like this which has come to kind of define us now, and which I guess one otherwise had a sense of, but had never felt so intensely. And one of the things which in one of the stories which is there, which Anuradha had said, where she says that, can the principles of everyone being equal before law bring justice to people in an unequal society? And which kind of really comes out in her stories, because so often it is just your identity which is really enough to get you into prison, where like, you know, like Fulmani, whom the Adivasi woman whom she talks about in her book, or the many Muslim men and women who have been arrested post the Delhi riots in cases like us. And as well as one thing which comes through the books, and even which I think I would say from our own experiences as well, is the fact that how many of the women who find themselves incarcerated inside prison have themselves fought so many really kind of incredible struggles against this Brahminical, patriarchal, capitalist system. And often actually it is through these struggles that they find themselves in circumstances where they land up in prison. Like, one of the things which really kind of struck me in prison was especially that a lot of the young women who would come inside, particularly in kind of what are called petty crimes like theft or snatching or something like that, almost 80-90% of them would be women who have been in some form of interfaith or intercaste relationship with somebody, and because of which they had to kind of, you know, abandon their family, or were thrown out of their families, or left their families really early on in their life, and after that had to kind of come to terms with the pain of that separation, because of which they might have gotten into like addiction into drugs or something like that. And then difficult because you can't have education and all of these things, so difficulty in finding sources of employment, and then finding yourself in situations like that. Or this one woman whom we had met, who was the similar story, having been like somebody from a Muslim man that she fell in love with, family threw her out. After that, finding herself in a situation of sexual harassment, after which she went and testified in court and fought that battle, but then had to get into sex work after that. And then once when a customer refused to pay her, she stole his wallet. And after that, she had to spend 8 months inside prison. So it's all these kind of things which I think are like, you know, so many people who have gone to prison, and these stories which are coming out, which also asks one to reflect on, you know, this thing of, you know, that everybody is equal before law. Actually, in fact, there used to be this joke in prison, which a lot of the old women used to say, कि ये अंधा कानून के आँख में मिर्ची पाउडर डाल देना चाहिए, मिर्ची पाउडर का पिचकारी ले आएंगे. So it's actually, people are asking the law not to be blind. They're asking the law to recognize these like, you know, these intense inequalities that exist in our society, and how when law and crime is thought about, you cannot ignore these structural inequalities which exist in society. And if one has, and that's why also, which also I think leads to the question of this exceptionalism which we often give to political prisoners. But really, a lot of women who are in prison are there because of political battles that they have fought in their lives, and which have created situations for them to be there. So in that sense also, I think thinking about when and I think for feminists, like for me, that was also the dilemma. Like we fight for laws as well, but when we are fighting for laws, then equally I think the prison also has to be a site of struggle. The conditions inside prison, or do we want even prisons, or how prison, what is that space? And that needs to come a lot more into imaginations of our feminist politics. Is definitely one reflection which I'm still thinking about, and I don't want to make any I don't know like deep comments about it, but that's something which is come. And lastly, also this kind of distinction of the inside and the outside, in terms of really the inside becomes a much more intensification of the pinjras and prison which already exist in the outside world. And there's one of this funny anecdotes of this one junior matron who was quite anti-Modi, who would often come and ask us, how are you guys doing, and this and that. And one day, after it had been 8-9 months, she was like, how are you? And we're like, theek hai, abhi itna time ho gaya hai, we have come to adjust a date. And she's like, ससुराल में भी तो ऐसा ही होता है ना, क्योंकि पहले ससुराल में जाओ तो मुश्किल ही होती है, फिर adjust हो जाते हैं. So I think that also really kind of so we need to build these connections between the inside and the outside lot more, I guess. And that is mostly the reflections I had to share. And thank you very much once again for giving me this book to read and for this chance to share. Thank you.
So, thank you very much, Devangana, for bringing the prison alive in ways which are not often known or recognized. Even the writing, newspaper writings and so on jails are somewhat sanitized, with statistics and so on. So this is really nice. So let's now invite our next speaker,
Aditya.
Yeah.
Aditya, please.
Yeah.
Take the floor.
Yeah. Yes.
Take the mic. Take the Zoom.
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm one of the translators. It's actually, if it wasn't for Gita Ramaswamy's insistence, I would not have been part of this wonderful collection. I mean, wonderful set of translators who have consistently been doing some really good work. Like in a previous instance, for example, Navyana has published Gogu Shamala's short stories. Some of the translators here have worked on it. This is my first published translation. But if the job of bringing these people together and actually putting them on this journey of discovering these wonderful works, and in the process, bringing it out into English, which would, given the fact that there is so little material from Telugu in English, it's really if people sadly the interface from languages like Telugu to English are so few and far between that it takes a Gita Ramaswamy to do this. The whole point is not to praise her, but the fact that if this happened only because of her, so I'm grateful it's happening, and I wish to see more of this, more books come out from her, because the editor's role and actually goading people into doing such things is very important. And although she wishes to be in the background and only facilitate these things, her role, because there are so few of us doing this, I think her work has to be acknowledged in the first place, because again, who would have brought all of these people together otherwise? Identifying a work as being worthy of translation, the whole idea that it has, this should actually reach more people, this should actually reach an English speaking audience. These are calls that someone has to take from within the Bhasha sphere, and those those happen very rarely, and when they happen, when they do happen, we get Prison Notes of a Woman Activist, such wonderful books, right? So the we need more and more people to, and sadly that has been in short supply in Telugu, and that's one of the things that I would like to discuss today. I mean, briefly, of course, not to get into statistics or any numbers or anything as such, but if we compare the kind of output, the number of English translations that are happening from Telugu are so few, especially in comparison with even the South Indian languages. If you see, of late, even Kannada, which was at one point not that visible in the English translation sphere, has really taken off in the last 2-3 years. With Gachar Gochar by Vivek Shanbag, it has really become it's something that something people recognize now. People recognize Kannada as a language in which great literature is produced, and people, if they see 2 or 3 names, they can actually recognize them, and are more likely to pick up a book, read it, and so on. That has happened already with Perumal Murugan in Tamil, and in Malayalam there is, I mean, I wouldn't even begin to there's an embarrassment of riches when it comes to, it's like every month we have at least 2 or 3 books coming, translations from Malayalam coming out. It's like an embarrassment of riches. You can't even keep track. It's so, I mean, the kind of I think at least 60 odd books must have come out in the last 2-4 years, I guess. I mean, it's like the floodgates have been opened of sorts. So somewhere in this whole scheme of things, even within the 4 major South Indian languages, Telugu has been the language that has contributed the least to this sort of reawakening of translations into English. The factors, briefly, I think, are one. I mean, like, of course, there are exceptions. One, a book called Liberation of Sita by Volga has some traction. I mean, it has had some visibility. It has had some nationwide attention. But other than that, I don't remember another work, despite being great works. For example, Kalyan Rao's Untouchable Spring, which is a really good work. It's supposed to have taken off, but somehow it has not caught the imagination of the English readers. The reasons can be distribution. I mean, it depends on the publisher. It depends on how much there is discourse around it, in the sense it has all the ingredients. It has it's a great Dalit work. It has it has aesthetical, I mean, it has a great structure. It is formally very good. It has everything going for it, but somehow it hasn't got the attention that it deserves. So similarly, there are works. So on the one end, there are works that have not been translated. I mean, the volume coming out from Telugu is very little. On the other hand, the works that do get translated don't get enough attention. So where exactly does the problem lie is something that people working in this space have to reflect upon. One of things, like, I mean, like, obviously we have done our job, we have to do our jobs, and we have to do it well. But unless we look at the larger picture, unless we look at what is happening, because clearly the need for a community in this is very important, because somehow, people have to feed, I mean, in a good way, feed off, I mean, in a good way. There should be camaraderie, there should be synergy when it comes to translation, but somehow when it comes to Telugu, there's very little of it. See, the case of Bangla is different, because Bangla has always been translating a lot. It has always had a steady stream of literature coming out in it, and so that's a different case. But even a language like Kannada is flourishing which is actually, if anything, it should actually awaken us to the need for producing more and more translations. What actually is actually stopping us, what I think is, one, on the end of the translators themselves, I think what has happened is people who are fluent in both languages, people who can actually write in idiomatic contemporary English, who have Telugu origin, that is, who have Telugu at the same time, can write in a fluent something that can communicate to the pan-Indian reader, pan-Indian audiences. Those are sadly very few. There are very few of us who can do that. People who know Telugu, that is. So that is one. There is obviously a dearth of translators, and that is one thing. And the ones who do exist, ones who are actually working, or ones who are actually practicing, they most of the time confine themselves to works like the present one, that is to say, which have some political subject is at their, that is what motivates them. For them, translation is a form of activism. So they are motivated by the need to put such a work out there for the larger larger national audience to see this. So for them, translation is activism, and mostly all collectives here, Anveshi, Asmita, and so on and so forth, are all, because they come from a political either from feminist or feminist political and such groups, they have largely ignored what are not necessarily obviously political works. For them, these take precedence, and those somehow are ignored. The what are considered literary purely are absent. So what happens is, people who are active, collectives such as Anveshi, Asmita, and so on and so forth, who are actively working in the regional space, who actually can actually understand Telugu material, they are mostly interested in subjects such as, which have some obviously political nature to it. So the other ones are getting ignored. So the people who, that is one thing. The second thing, in Telugu, what has happened is, there is fiction. I'm talking now about the supply side. That is to say, there is an assumption among the Telugu people who are stakeholders in Telugu, people, writers, editors, publishers, and so on. The assumption is that there is a lot of brilliant work existing in Telugu, but it has not, because there is a dearth of translators, or because it has not found that publisher, or so on and so forth. It has not really, because it's not in English, we have not really got the attention. Otherwise, we would have like great recognition. It would be read by all the everyone. But actually, there is a deficit there also. For example, not much fiction is being produced. By fiction, I mean novels are not being produced in Telugu. In comparison with the other languages, novels seem to be in like the art of the novel seems to be flourishing a lot, whereas somehow when it comes to novels, Telugu again has been a very, like, on the back footing for a long time. Novels are more likely to get published in English, but somehow that is also not somehow that is not also recognized here. And even if when novels do get written, they are not of a very high quality, in a way they can actually capture the imagination of someone who may not be familiar, he's in no way invested in Telugu or anything like, who has no who is not a Telugu person. That hasn't happened. So in many, I mean, I have too little time to go into detail about all these things, but the point I'm trying to make is because there is a divide, because unless we come together and as a community, as people who sort of straddle the Telugu and English worlds, if we don't come together and think of a way to bridge this gap, if we don't increase the volume of output from English, from Telugu to English, it will always be a minority voice. It will always be something that is mentioned in the passing. So Telugu bhi hai, aisa hoga. It will be like once there is a roll call, we will be the one who Telugu will be someone who will be trailing behind. I mean, is Telugu a big deal? I mean, is the Telugu identity a big deal? No, but the whole idea is experiences from this part of the world should also be understood, appreciated by the rest of India, right? So somewhere there is a clear gap, there is a clear distance, and that I hope, because all of us have some interest in this whole the whole activity, or the sphere of translation. Basically, I'd like you all to reflect on this question and see if it can be remedied sooner than later, because everyone seems to be like, I mean, I see every day some brilliant Malayalam novel is getting translated. There is a 3 or 4 books of a particular writer coming out within months. So somewhere when it comes to Telugu, I mean, somehow it doesn't seem to be in the picture at all. It will be great if we look in that direction and not see this in isolation, not see this particular book or the other books that Ratna Books is putting out, or Oxford will put out, or Penguin, and so on and so forth. All these things in isolation, if it's this one-off thing, if it's just about this book, it's okay, it's a great book, it will come out, it will be talked about, it will have its own journey. But unless we see this in a continuum, with the rest of the work, I mean, if we don't see it as a body of literature, somehow I think we actually will be doing a great disservice to the literature that is available in Telugu. So with that, I conclude. I hope I haven't taken too much time. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Let me now invite Anuradha to talk about the writing of the book and why she chose the form that she did and so on. Those would be interesting issues for us to think about, apart from whatever else you may want to say. Anuradha?
Thank you, Ma. Actually, after coming out of jail, many of my friends were asking about my experiences in jail. So I started telling them 1 or 2 incidents, and many of them actually advised me to write that as a story. Actually, it started in the jail itself, because I used to correspond with some political prisoners who are still in jail right now, Vernon and Arun and Sridhar, who's no more. So in those letters, actually, the first letter I wrote about Paro's cats, actually. And also I discussed the problem of a daughter in that letter. And actually the way I wrote to them, they felt that it actually can become a story if I write seriously. So that was my first story while still in jail. And also another story. Only 2 of them actually I wrote in jail, because I never found time to write in jail. I was always busy with the co-prisoners, their problems and petitions and all that. So after coming out, my friend Vanuja, I used to spend some time with her, and every time I told her something, she immediately used to stop me and said, write this, don't tell. So like that, I started writing. And Vasant Lakshmi Garu of Andhra Jyoti, at the time she was in charge. And I have sent one story to Andhra Jyoti, and that has got published. And afterwards, when I asked her about sending another story, and she suggested that I should write more, and maybe she can run a column. So that's how actually these stories went into the mainstream. Actually, it's not just that I just started telling the incidents. It is because, all those women with whom I have spent the time in the jail, those, their pathos actually haunted me even after coming out of the jail. I used to think of them every day, and it's, just I couldn't help writing the stories. It so happened that I thought I should tell these stories to the outer world, because so they say everybody is equal in the eyes of law, but nobody is equal in the society. So actually, prisoners are different, like women prisoners are different from men prisoners. Actually, the reasons behind their incarceration is usually different. They're not hardcore criminals like that. Some of them can be there, but most of them will come with, after facing a lot of domestic violence and or in self-defense or something, they must have killed her husband or whatever. So like that they come, or else some women actually, they want to commit suicide, and just they're afraid of leaving their children alone in the society. So they try to actually commit suicide along with the children. And in some instances, the children will die and the women survive. I have seen one case, and I have written about Shakun in this story, in this book. But after spending a second time in jail in Hyderabad, I found more of them like this, who attempted to commit suicide along with their children, and where the children died and they survived, and so got life imprisonment. There were so many people in Hyderabad, they were mentioned. So that way, I just always get this doubt, how is this justified? How can they be equal? They are victims and perpetrators. So in this unjust society, how can they get justice? That is one thing. Actually, some 2 years ago, some friends in Bengal asked me if there is a part 2. Very spontaneously, I told them that if I go to jail again, then maybe there is part 2. And I did go. Hazaribagh cases actually took 10 years to complete. And in the last case, I got acquitted in 2019, October. The same month, I got arrested in 2009. And in November, again, I got arrested. That is actually when we wanted to organize a press conference about the Ayodhya judgment. So in the morning itself, we got arrested, and I spent 8 months. Actually, the difference this time is maybe this is life in jail in the times of Corona. Like love in times of cholera, I have to write maybe jail life in times of Corona. It's very different. This experience is actually very different. And, spending time in jail, like even Devangana said, without interviews, without anybody coming and meeting you, and without going out for court dates, and nothing, no articles, no magazines, no newspapers, and nothing to eat other than what we are given in the prison. So this actually becomes a very difficult aspect of this thing. So maybe there is a part 2, I don't know. I may write, I'm not sure yet. But actually, these stories, if not for Gita, it wouldn't have come into English, because that is when actually she was republishing Mary Taylor's book. She contacted me actually. So when I wrote about Mary Taylor in one of the Sunday columns of Andhra Jyoti, so many people actually mail me asking where they can find that book of Mary Taylor. So even Gita, because Gita is the one HPT actually published the Telugu version. So Gita is also getting so many requests that where they can find the book. So that's how actually Gita found out that I have written about Mary Taylor, and she read my book and instantly she felt that this should come into English. And she only actually contacted most of the, translators, except for 4 stories where my friends and cousin translated. 11 of the translators did them without even knowing me. They just did it for Gita. And I'm so glad. Actually, I take this opportunity to thank each one of them. Because actually coming into English, so it is reaching so many people, even in other states where nobody can read Telugu. Actually, in other states, many people are asking me when it is coming in English. And I should thank actually Ratna Books, because Dinesh ji and Sridhar Balanji, they did a really excellent job, because the quality of the production is so wonderful. I liked it very much. And many of the readers who actually read it contacted me to tell me how good the quality of the book is. It's also important because sometimes, it attracts some unexpected readers actually. And once again, I take this opportunity and thank Uma, because she endorsed my book, and I'm so happy that she is here today. And I'm so sad that Gita couldn't come here and give her feedback. Actually, I missed that.
Yeah.
And I have seen Uma's documentary also on political prisoners. 2 parts I have seen. And I really actually, it's a long history, like, see, you're part of it. And knowing all the senior comrades who actually spent in jail, and some of them even wrote their memoirs. Actually, Jayamitra's killing days, I read some, maybe in 2006. Actually, when she came to organize, to address a seminar we conducted in Jharkhand, in Ranchi. And it is a nice feeling actually to hear their experiences, which Uma very well, very nicely documented. It's a good history. And I'm also happy that I'm also part of this, though I'm not appearing on that film, but I consider myself part of a history. And youngsters like Devangana, maybe if they start writing, even Rajveer, who spent some time, her sister and all, if they write, maybe they can have some new angles also to this whole thing. And in the most horrible times where because of Corona and also because of the state's attitude, they faced a lot of difficulties and faced torture. So if they write, I think it will be a continuity. Maybe they can give more, so they can draw a lot of support for all these unfortunate women, who are actually still in jails. If sometimes I feel it is very important for the political activists to go to jail, because they fight there for at least some amenities or for books, for whatever. So we should all feel, all the political prisoners who went to jail should feel that we got the access to a newer space where we can continue our battle. That way, actually, the jails, because, the jails who have better amenities all came because of the struggles our seniors actually made. So we have to see, I think, in this, but sometimes, I feel it's like Hazaribagh jail, though it is a central jail, it is located in a rural area. So the stories are completely different, because if there were 100 prisoners there, women prisoners, 80 of them came in domestic violence cases. And one more thing, here in Hyderabad, because it's a metropolitan city, here the cases are very different. Like even having foreigners and drug cases, prostitution cases, to a small chori cases and all, and also domestic violence cases. So it is actually a completely different jail. So experiences are also very different. But what I experienced this time is, like Hyderabad jail has so many facilities, but the attitude of the jail authorities is important, because they think that it is their mindset. Like if they think that if they experience all this, I mean, take all these facilities, how will they feel that they're in jail? So there is a coffee machine which never works. There is a drinking water plant which never works. And like so many facilities are there. Even for the convicted prisoners, there is a big laundry, electrical laundry machine, which they never operate. Like that, it is a way they think that they can make the prisoners suffer so that they won't come again. But it is not like that. It won't work like that. They will go outside the jail with, with so much of revengeful this thing, and all their life will be torn off with this experience. And no way they are going to think that we are not going to come again. It's not like that. So I felt that it is not only important to have any minimum amenities, but it also depends on the jail authorities' attitude. So altogether, it is a different experience. Maybe Devangana's experience will be much more different because she was in Tihar jail, the bigger one, with so many different things. So I wish Devangana and Rajveer and other youngsters should also write their experiences into stories or whatever form they like to take. And I take this opportunity to thank Uma and Balaji Garu and Aditya, and especially Sridhar Balan and Dinesh ji, who actually joined for at least some time. And also Gita, though she's not speaking, at least I know she's listening. I thank each one of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Anuradha. Yeah, now I'm technically there was meant to be comments from the editor, which is Gita was meant to speak, and I'm not sure she's going to speak. Is she declining to speak? She's not in a position to speak. No, is that right?
She's not in a position to speak.
Okay, so shall I just use my?
We keep half an hour for the interaction or responses.
Okay, that's great. That's great. So then, so you've had now a range of issues being put out. Apart from the writing, there's also been questions of translation and what it means, the experiences themselves. So let's have some discussion. I'm not, you're supposed to do something in the chat box and so on, but maybe you have to raise hand or something.
Yeah, please raise hand. Our admin will allow you and unmute your speaker and then start speaking. Okay, this is a book to translate. This is a translation of a Telugu book published by Ratna Publishers, Ratna Books. This is a webinar jointly conducted, organized by both Ratna Books and Hyderabad Book Trust. Before somebody raises their hand, I just wanted to take this small time to read out all the translators in the book. Aditya Korrapati, Anuradha Kotluri, Arvinda Kotluri, Utla Balaji, Gita Ramaswamy, Korrapati Samyukta, Raj Karamchedu, Rigoberta Prabhata, Ratna Madhavi, Sesikumar Maringanti, P. Satyavati, Sudha Kiran, Sudhakar Unudurti, Sureka Aita Batula, Yan Venugopal. And the editor of this book is Gita Ramaswamy.
I noticed that Prabhat Sridevan, Justice Prabhat Sridevan has raised her hand. So let's have her. It would be wonderful to get a response from someone who's occupied the bench.
Yes.
Thank you very much for a lovely webinar. I'm going to speak not as somebody who sat on the bench, but as somebody who's ventured into translation after I retired. And I have done 2 books for Ratna. So I just wanted to say that everyone is a natural translator. So there is nothing called a professional translator. So we can all jump into translation, which is what I did. And the experience of being a translator, I'm sure that those of you who have translated Anuradha's book, I just read three, I think, out of it. We experience it in the same way that Anuradha did. That is what translation does. Because we are in that same space. It's not quite like reading, it's much more intense than reading. Now I have done 2 more books which are due to come. One is Topil Muhammad Miran's short stories, and the other is Imayam's short stories. And I think Mr. Balaji Utla and the other translators would have gone through all that Anuradha spoke about. And then the other speaker, Aditya, his anguish about Telugu not being translated enough, I very much sympathize with. I think we have understood the value of translation rather late. Whether we like it or not, our words should get on to English for getting to the world stage. It has to. I don't know Telugu. How will I read Anuradha but for that the channel of English? And therefore, it's very valuable. See, we read Borges and Coelho or anyone without even pausing to think that they are all because of the translation. We don't remember the translator, the silent worker. So mine is not really a question, it's an argument for more translation. And as Mr. Aditya said, how will the world know our culture, our life, what we went through? Each is unique, and our country is a world in itself. And therefore, more strength to translators. Please don't hesitate and think, I am not a professional translator. There is no such thing. Just feel for the subject and bring it into the language that you want to translate. I really want many more translation, and I congratulate Ratna for what they are doing. Thank you very much for the time given to me. Uma, thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, we've gone a long way from the old days about translation. There was a time when it was considered that you cannot translate the spirit of a language into another language. And particularly it was believed that English will kill it. But I think we've gone a long way from there. And now English is not only the one language which across the rest of India we are able to understand. So it's absolutely imperative to be translating in English, and we need to know what is happening in our country, including in our jails. So as far as I'm concerned, it's great. It's great that people are translating. We have Shashi here, and we have Surekha. Let me have a request Shashi ji to speak first.
Okay, thank you. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want very briefly taking on, it's not in the nature of a question, but a comment I have to make. And it's taking off from what Aditya was talking. I've been a big fan of HBT and seeing what's happening with what they are doing over the last 30 or 40 years. And actually, Telugu publication and what's happening within Telugu itself, it's undergoing a sea change. For example, from print runs of maybe 3,000, 5,000, which used to be quite common for HBT to do, now they are doing print runs of 300 or 500. That is the market for Telugu books itself. shrinking. And actually what's happening is that there's a greater readership in English, which is also there in the Telugu speaking world or in the Telugu geography. So which makes a case actually that it is not only translations, though translations of course are there, but it's not translations for the Indian public, but it's also translations for the Telugu public itself. That is people who belong to this place, but they know the language, but they are not fluent in reading it. They can speak it. So there are a whole lot of things like that. And apart from that, there's a lot of writing in English itself, which pertains to this geography, which is coming. People are writing about this place in English. And this whole thing about, the English language market in India, and treating it as some kind of a monolithic or a homogeneous thing, saying that there's an Indian market for English, but which may not actually be so. There could be really regional markets for English, where people would be interested in knowing about their areas and what's happening there, and in the English language. It could be translations, it could be original work. And unfortunately, all the English language publishers, they set themselves as a India-wide publisher. They set themselves up as if they are addressing a kind of a national market. And in that process, what happens is lots of really very worthwhile thing, which has a market of its own in the regional or in the diaspora or wherever it might be. They miss out because the national publishers don't pick up these titles. So I think there's a case quite apart from translations, which are also very important. There's a case really that there should be regional publishing in English, which includes translation. And no, we don't need to go to Ratna to get a translation into English. I mean, we could very well do it in Hyderabad and publish it from Hyderabad, and we'll find a market in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. Maybe there'll be a market in the USA or the rest of the country, but primarily a market here is what we find. So I think it is worth thinking also in these lines and not think of regional publishing as something which happens in regional languages, and the only way they can get to a national market is to find someone in Delhi to publish them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's have, I have someone, it says Surekha Doordarshan. If that's, can we have you, please? Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Good evening. And thank you, the organizer, whoever thought of this webinar. I'm really so grateful because I get to share my reflections here about translation and about the author. The author happens to be my cousin, and we knew each other teenage onwards, and we became great friends. And right from then, I used to notice that she's always been a thinker. She's always been a thinker, she had no time for no frills and no, fluff in her thinking. She had, she made very pointed observations. This was right from teenage, I noticed. And then we lost touch because I moved to Delhi on my first posting in IIS. And then we lost touch. After that, there was a family wedding and we met at the family wedding. And then we were like, oh, so much to catch up, so many years to catch up and all that. And then she told me that I have published my, my musings on jail time. So I said, oh, let me read it. So it was in the pullout of Andhra Jyoti. Believe it or not, in one afternoon, I finished all the supplements in which her column appeared. They were so racy. Her style is so simple and so, and very absorbing. I really liked it. And it kind of stayed her experience, prison experience, and the kind of things she observed, and the empathy, the tremendous empathy that she had for the women who were suffering there. She actually agonized, and you can hear the agony in that Telugu that she wrote. She did a fantastic job. And then also, if you notice that she's talking about the suffering of all the women, more or less all the women that approached her, and also the women that did not approach her, but were going through a great misfortune by being jailed for trivial reasons, like somebody's goat got into the cooking pot, so she was jailed, and the daughter-in-law for some reason. And then if you notice, all the agony is turned towards agony that she feels is for them. Never once does she write about her own suffering, the reason why she's in prison, and the hardships that she went through. I'm sure she went through a lot of hardships. Never once does she mention that. She's always thinking of others, always thinking of helping the helpless women prisoners. I think that is absolutely commendable, personality-wise, and even as a writer. It was it kind of stayed, but then there was a lot of gap when we actually talked about, we got back again when I came back from Delhi, and she told me, listen, why don't you translate? So it was like a bulb went off, See, I went to a convent, I speak English, I read English, I can converse in English, I can communicate, but translation is something that I never ventured into, never thought about even, because my Telugu reading had stopped. See, my Telugu reading began as a kid because thanks to my dad, who made me a bookworm, who himself was a bookworm, had a shelf full of Telugu literature and Russian literature. So I used to just keep going into his shelf. There was Chalam, Chalam is one writer that I remember, and Maidanam, I still remember the poster, the cover of that book. And I tried to read it, but I was too young to catch it. And moreover, English, when you are in a convent and when you talk to your friends in English and all that, English kind of dominates, and then you kind of ignore the other languages. That's very unfortunate, actually, that after class 10, you lose touch with your mother tongue, which is Telugu, and then you branch off English, and it kind of dominates your, the whole mechanism, the whole scheme of things is all made of English. So I remember at my home, we used to get all the Telugu patrika. Andhra Jyoti Ochedi, Andhra Prabha Ochedi, Yuva Ochedi, and so many magazines. And both my parents read every week. So many Telugu books used to come, and I used to read from page to page. I used to chew them up. And I'm really happy. I was so happy with that kind of very fruitful experience in my childhood of reading Telugu literature. I absolutely agree with this gentleman, Aditya, who said that those who straddle Telugu and English, we all must come together. So I tell Aditya and everybody else here that when eventually you all come together, please call me. I will also come.
Okay.
So coming back.
Are you sort of more or less done? Could you, because there are other questions and maybe others may.
Oh, you want me to wind up? Okay. Yeah.
So make your comments, but we will also, there are other hands that have been raised.
Yeah, okay. So, and about translation, a bit about translation. So I said this is my first ever translation. It's been a journey of self-discovery. I have learned that, yes, I can translate. And somehow what I did was it was a long time since I read her stories in Andhra Jyoti, when I met her at the wedding. And there's been a lot of gap after that. And then when I picked up actual stories that she sent to me in mail and asked me to translate, I went line by line. I didn't read right from the beginning till the end. Like I was discovering the story and translating it as I went down translating. And I used to do a lot of stories which I liked, that I used to do it from end to end at one stretch. So I just absolutely loved it. I want to share this experience with you. That translation is something I really like. I've really taken to like a fish to water. And I think I must venture into more, bring Telugu literature on to, bring it to lot more readers than they are now through English. Thank you very much for listening to me. If I overtook, I'm sorry.
You're very well.
Advice.
Thank you very much. As a translator, you have every right to have spoken about your experiences as a translator. That's wonderful. Can we have Mr.
Mohan Srinivas.
Mohan Srinivas, please?
Yes, I'm very happy to be here to see all of you, and also your concern that all of you have read this book, and I had the opportunity of reading the Telugu version of the book while I am yet to read the English version. The author has touched some wonderful issues that are concerning the law and the application of the law, whether the purpose for which the acts are framed are reaching the people who really deserve the services, the concern of the law. In that aspect, she has done a wonderful job. As a person, she has been always a very sensitive person who has been sensitive towards the feelings and the predicaments of the downtrodden and the poor, and also the discrimination in the society and all. And she was always conscious of that. And in these particular stories, she has dismantled the society belief that all those who are inside the prison are those who have committed some crimes, and all those who are outside the prisons are gentlemen. That is the wrong notion which our society has even till today. Indeed, there are many innocents loitering in jails who are waiting for an opportunity to be heard by the court so that they can get an acquittal. At the same time, there are those who have raped, those who have murdered, who are freely moving in the society. And she has addressed those issues very rightly, particularly that in spite of our country having the best of constitutions in the world, and our criminal law being the best in the world, still where no person gets punished unless given a reasonable opportunity to prove his innocence, still there are so many people to whom the benefit of constitution or law are deprived, the fundamental human rights are violated, and the way they are suffering. The best part and the greatest part of her work is that her empathy towards each one of them who suffered. You see all their suffering in her heart, which has come in the form of a writing, in the form of a story. That is the best part of it. Indeed, this particular author has the skill of writing from her very childhood, and she was a wonderful writer, but only thing was that she has not put it in the form of stories at any point of time. So this is why I thought just I should congratulate her for her work, and she has done a very wonderful work. And indeed, these kind of works do bring into notice of the authorities who frame the constitution or the laws as to how they have to address the social issues. That way, I congratulate her, and I'm happy that I could see her and that I could have expressed my feelings on her writings. I'm happy about it. I conclude.
Thank you, thank you. Is there anyone else would ask a question also about other issues apart from translation?
We also have I see two translators, N. Venugopal and Sudhakar Unutil.
Well, they should definitely speak and raise issues, both about the writing and not only about the translation, but about the writing itself is also useful. Venugopal, would you like to say something? While he's thinking about it, if anyone else needs to say, well, yeah, there he is. Venugopal, do you want to ask a question?
Thank you, Uma. There is nothing particularly to talk about, but only one thing I wanted to make known to the audience here is that in Telugu, this book had a title of a very wonderful title, very insightful title of Edi Neram. What is a crime?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that is the essence of the whole experience and its reflection.
Mm.
She has gone into jail for her activity in social transformation. That was treated as a crime. And when she went inside the jail, she found that there are so many non-crimes being treated as crimes, and which gave a lot of suffering to hundreds and thousands of people. Essentially, she was asking what is a crime. And I think that title would give the essential element of the whole treatise. That's what I want to tell you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? I know there are some prison specialists sitting over here also. They should also speak up.
Uma, I think Nisha requested to speak.
Oh, Nisha, I didn't see it. Okay, Nisha, please do speak.
Yeah, firstly, I would congratulate Anuradha once again to you. I know Anuradha for quite some time, and it is one of her story through which the CRPP, which Oma has also referred to, Paro's kids, through which I got her connected again after she has been released from jail. And Anuradha, your stories are very insightful, very empathetic. But you know, I wish that I would have gone to jail after reading your stories. Because then probably I had different sight, a different view of seeing things. And I wish that I would have been stayed in jail for a few more years, not only 1.5 months, so that I could bring out some more different kind of stories of inmates. It was hardly 1.5 months in which, and then that too in transit jail, so could not get that kind of have that kind of experience as well. So I would like to congratulate you again and again and again, and I wish that you will be writing many more stories like this. And before this book has come out, of course, you have sent me many translations in Hindi and in English also, which I have read. So thank you, and thank you again for getting this book published. And this public book is not in demand, and one of my comrade has, in fact, taken away the first book that I got, and then I have to get second one again. And I do not know how many more I have to, so that people keep lifting it from my house. Thank you, Anuradha.
Sharmila.
Sharmila, come on. Absolutely. I've been waiting for you.
Hi, Uma. Hi, Anuradha. Hi, Devangana. Hi, everyone. I suppose, Anuradha, I followed you before you went to jail. I was devastated when you went to jail again, because I found that what you had to tell me in an interview before you were putting together your collection made all the difference to my understanding as a researcher on prison writings. And while you were in jail, there was no way in which I could contact you, and that I felt very bad about. And it gave me an opportunity to then think deeply about what you had written and shared with me, which were your draft writings, as it were, before they came out in print. So I was one of the lucky few to read it in its draft version. And just as Uma noticed, the story that gripped her, the account that gripped her was the one which I think you said a lot of people have found very, very gripping, is the connection you make with Mary Tyler. And I think, as you said, Anuradha, that you belong to a history. And that history, I just want to speak very briefly, is a very important history, precisely because I think, as Devangana ended, do we want prisons? Don't we want prison? I don't think it's left to us alone, but it's a very stark truth that we live in a society, in a democracy, which accepts prisons. And we are quite okay with people going in and losing their freedom. And as you mentioned, in Corona times, even interviews are stopped. Now, how long are we, what is our view about prisons? How do we relate to it from the outside? Is a very difficult aspect. You who've been inside have a way of relating to it. You brought before us certain things simply because the prison is opaque. We don't know what happens inside. But when you write about prison, it's a very different aspect. People have talked at length about translation, but the act of writing is a very important aspect, and I think it differs much from the way in which ordinary memoirs work. Even though they may share a lot with ordinary memoirs, in many ways you're writing about your experiences. And I want to touch on one account which people haven't really perhaps commented on, and I think it's a very valuable point to make over there, Anuradha, and which is that you say in one of your accounts, I forget the name, in which you give an account of who you are. And, in most prison accounts, that's very difficult because as political prisoners, you are caught in a criminal case. There is a difficulty of telling who you are and what you have been accused of, so on and so forth, simply because there's a state narrative so difficult to puncture and to to counter. But in spite of that, to talk about who you are is very important. And I think everyone should be reading that to know who Anuradha is. Where does she come from? How did she get into becoming a political activist? So giving that kind of biography, political biography, Anuradha makes one point, which is that, till 2007, she had been also on the outside going and visiting prisons and meeting and talking to people. But you never get to know till you go inside. And I think, Uma, that's a very stark truth that nobody can quite cross. That's a Lakshman Rekha that you can't quite cross. And I think there is therefore an absolute need to know more and more, also because the kind of inhuman practices that happen inside the prison that we need to know more about, less so in women's prisons than maybe in the male wards, the kind of overcrowding and the unintended inhuman practices that are also there, but also that prison means fettered life, and it has an impact on people's minds. It has an impact on their emotions. It has an impact on the way in which they think and relate. And we need to become aware of what prison can do to people and why post-prison, it's wonderful to see you people sitting here and talking, but I don't know how many people in the past would have wanted to talk about their prison life so easily. And why would they want to talk about it? Simply because the post-prison life is so tough. To get back to everyday life when you're being hounded in a political case, for instance, or as you mentioned in the case of Arun, being picked up all over again. I mean, what is the certainty that prison, once you come out, it's all over? It's never going to restart again. And I thought I saw Seema Azad over here, and she has a fascinating account to tell. And her book is very, very, very good, and it's in Hindi. And I see no reason why that should be a deterrent per se, but I think that it's something that we should be focusing more on. And if she's here, she could speak. And I mentioned to her your work, Anuradha. And she knows your work. Everybody knows your work, but we should know Seema's work. It's fascinating what it means to be in Allahabad and to have spent also as a UAPA prisoner over there. I thought I saw her. Thank you, Anuradha.
She was here. She was here, but I'm not sure she's here at the moment. She should certainly ask the question. I think that one of the issues that we need to talk about, which may be skirted around in the writing, which may be bluntly stated in the writing, but hasn't come up over here, is that certainly no one should go away with the impression that the jail time is something to be valorized, even though I know some great guy has said jail is the best political education. I don't know if it was Marx or Lenin or some great guy has said that. And I would rather that you didn't have that political education in jail, that you had it outside and you were able to stand up for it. So I think it's very important for us to also focus on the sheer inhumanity of the way in which jails are administered. And there is a agenda to that. It is actually to break the spirit of people so that they will never actually stand up. They'll be terrorized and perhaps not go in for the political activity that took them in the first place. So I think that the inhumanity of the jail, and for me as someone who has been addressing it through the interactions with people, I am struck by the fact that in our society, we do not even have a prison monitoring committee. We have eminent judges, we have eminent writers, we have eminent thinkers. Nobody has thought of why should the jails be so inhumane? Why should there be, okay, I mean, there is supposed to be a sort of statement, which is a statement of purpose, which is you are there, you lose your right to freedom of movement, but you don't lose any of the other fundamental rights to health, to dignity, to whatever it is. And story after story of people who've been inside the jails actually tells you how inhumane the structure is and how inhumane the system is. So I'm also, the more we write, the more people perhaps read, maybe there will be a movement, there will be a way in which we'll think about why should jails be the way they are? And why should you be subjected to the kind of, I mean, it's a running torture. It's not, you may not have been tortured, you may or may not have considered that, okay, I was tortured in police custody, but now, whatever. Actually, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And why should that torture continue? Which is what a jail incarceration is, and for everyone. So to me, that's a fundamental issue. And powerful writing is important, but I think powerful action would also be useful. Yeah. There's one more hand. I think I saw one hand. Was it someone else who had raised a hand?
But that hand was withdrawn.
Okay, it was withdrawn. So anyone else? I'll give you this opportunity, and if not, we will return to the publishers for them to make the closing comments.
I do want to add one last bit, if I may.
Sure.
Which is that given that there is a history of such writing and in various languages and also in English, and that there is a fair output, if you see in the world across the transnational narratives, there's a now increasing focus also on the creative aspect. So of course, the documentary aspect of prison life is very important to bring before us the life of the others in jail. And India stands, or maybe South Asia stands, as somewhat of an example insofar as political prisoners are held with ordinary prisoners and they're never given the status. But in other countries, depending on the nature of the movements, they have often been detained by themselves because of the extreme nature of their history, as it were. So the documentary aspect of prison writing is very important, but then when you're also looking at it as a form of literature, you're also looking at how the, for instance, Varvara Rao's Captive Imagination. It's really trying to build a case for why we should start thinking of imagination in a different way. And I do think that women's writing has tremendous potential. And I agree with Uma entirely that women's writing on prison is quite different from so far as what we have seen than men's writing. Even though now there is such wonderful men's writing like Arun or Varvara Rao or Gilani or others also who have been writing. But I do think that when you start thinking about the speaking eye in fettered conditions, it is something for us to take further because in feminism, we have been so widely introduced to the idea of confinement. We can start thinking of confinement and the eye and the creative potential that lies between the two. And that's something that not those who are writing, but those who are thinking, but even those who are writing will surely be able to show us ways of thinking further. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, I'll give you opportunity for 1 minute for anyone else who's desperate to ask a question. And if not, then I will suggest that we close the discussion. Anyone else? let it never be said that I did not give you the opportunity. See, I'm a teacher first and last, so questions must be always honorably addressed.
I say there are no bad questions.
Okay, all right. All right, then. I will hand you back to the, I think that, the closing point, I made my plea for the fact that the prison should not be treated as something that we can forget and ignore. And increasingly, you can see that we should not be doing it. So I will continue to make a plea for the fact that people should write, people should think, people should act. That's what would satisfy me. And on that note, I will close. So translation is very important, publishing is very important, but ultimately some form of civil society action to actually transform the meaning of incarceration should be something that we should try and do. So who's, would you like to then conclude?
Yeah. So I see some messages in chat. Kudos, salutes, and thanks to both Anuradha and Devangana. Devangana's mother, Kalpana, in fact, congratulated and congratulated Anuradha. And Kondabiti Chakravarthy, Bhumika's editor, says or urges Anuradha to pen her experiences in Chanchalguda. She met her, Satyavati says Satyavati met Anuradha in Chanchalguda jail, and she was moved with the empathy that Anuradha was showing towards her co-prisoners, and Satyavati Kondaviti wants Anuradha to pen the experiences of Chanchalguda. And some other, all salutes, kudos, and thanks and congratulations to the Anuradha. I see in chat. No, nothing in the form of questions or remarks or responses. Yeah.
So I will just use my substitution for Gita.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, all of you, for collecting and for raising such important issues and for making such important pleas in the end for how we might look at not only the writing but also the subjects of the writing and the experiences that form the basis of the writing. And I thank everyone individually and all of you collectively for having come here and participated in this very rich discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Uma Garu. This is a bilingual webinar evening, wonderful evening with translators. This is a webinar jointly conducted, organized by Ratna Books and Hyderabad Book Trust. This is a wonderful evening. Anuradha Garu Telugulo రాసినటువంటి పుస్తకానికి అనువాద పుస్తకం. ఈ అనువాద పుస్తకాన్ని రత్న బుక్స్ పబ్లిష్ చేసింది. ఆ పబ్లిష్ చేసిన ఇంగ్లీష్ పుస్తకానికి సంబంధించినటువంటి పుస్తక ఆవిష్కరణ వెబినార్ ని మనం ఈ సాయంత్రం జరుపుకున్నాం. అనురాధ గారు ఏమైనా మాట్లాడాలనుకుంటున్నారా మీరు? I saw you wanted to say something.
ఏం లేదండి, ఒక్క విషయం చెప్పాలనుకుంటున్నాను.
అదే నేను మీ జెస్చర్ చూసి
అంటే యూజువల్లీ యాక్టివిస్ట్ అరెస్ట్ అయినప్పుడు చాలా మంది అనుకుంటారు అంటే ఫ్యామిలీ మాత్రమే పట్టించుకుంటుంది అనే ఒక ఎక్యుజేషన్ ఉంది కదా. కానీ నేను చాలా లక్కీ ఆ విషయంలో. అంటే గీతతో సహా నన్ను కలవడానికి చాలా మంది వచ్చారు. కొండవీటి సత్యవతి గారు, ఇంకా జ్యోతి, ఇట్లా చాలా మంది నన్ను, సంధ్య గారు కలవడానికి వచ్చారు. ఇట్స్ అ రియలీ వండర్ఫుల్ థింగ్ ఫర్ మీ. ఎందుకంటే మనం జైల్లో ఉన్నప్పుడు పొలిటికల్ యాక్టివిస్ట్ వచ్చి మనని కలవడం అనేది అక్కడ చాలా స్ట్రెంగ్త్ ఇస్తుంది కూడా. సో ఐ జస్ట్ టేక్ దిస్ ఆపర్చునిటీ టు థ్యాంక్ దెమ్ ఆల్. థ్యాంక్ యూ అనంత్ గారు, థ్యాంక్స్.
ప్రశ్నలు, సమాధానాలు, ప్రతిస్పందనలు, స్పందనలకి మనం ఇంగ్లీష్ లో మాత్రమే అవకాశం ఇచ్చామన్నటువంటి ఒక ఫీలింగ్ ని మనం తీసేయడం కోసం నేను ఒక 10 నిమిషాలు, ఒక 5 నుంచి 10 నిమిషాలు తెలుగు స్పందనలు కూడా కేటాయిద్దాం అనేటువంటి ఒక నేను
మాట్లాడొచ్చా?
ప్లీజ్ ప్లీజ్. ఒక్క నిమిషం. Umaji, I am taking with my discretion, I am allowing some responses in Telugu.
Sure, absolutely. Why not? Why not? Of course.
Yeah. Hello, Umaji. Hi. Yeah. Ananta garu.
Yes, ma'am. Carry on.
ఏం లేదండి, అంటే భూమిక నుంచి మేము చెంచల్గూడ విమెన్ ప్రిజన్ లో ఒక 5 సంవత్సరాలు పనిచేస్తాం. ఇన్సైడ్ ప్రిజన్ లోపల ఒక కౌన్సిలింగ్ సెంటర్ ఉండేది. అప్పుడు నేను అనురాధని చాలా దగ్గరగా చూశాను. ప్రిజన్ లో ఉన్నప్పుడు తను నిజానికి ఒక లెటర్ రాసి కూడా నాకు అప్పుడు ఇచ్చారు. అయితే తను మిగతా ఖైదీలందరినీ చుట్టూ కూర్చోబెట్టుకుని వాళ్ళకి సంబంధించిన బెయిల్ పిటిషన్, ఇందాక నేను కామెంట్స్ కూడా రాశాను, చాలా ఆశ్చర్యపోతుండేదాన్ని. అంటే తనలో ఉన్న ఎందుకు జైల్లో ఉన్నాను అనే ఆలోచన ఎప్పుడు నేను తనలో కనవళ్ళ. మాట్లాడుకునే వాళ్ళని చెట్టు కింద కూర్చుని, కానీ తను ఎప్పుడు కూడా తోటి ఖైదీల వాళ్ళ క్షేమం, వాళ్ళ బెయిల్ పిటిషన్స్ రాయడం, వాళ్ళకి ములాఖత్ ఎందుకు రాలేదు, ఎవరు రాలేదు ఎందుకని, ఈ విషయాలన్నీ కూడా చాలా సీరియస్ కన్సర్న్స్ తో పట్టించుకుంటూ ఉండేవారు. నేను రిక్వెస్ట్ చేస్తుంది ఏంటంటే, అనురాధ కూడా ఇక్కడ కూడా చాలా స్టోరీస్ ఉండే ఉంటాయి చెంచల్గూడ విమెన్ ప్రిజన్ లో కూడా, అవి కూడా రాయాలనేది నా రిక్వెస్ట్. అందుకే నేను మాట్లాడడానికి వచ్చాను. థ్యాంక్ యూ. అనురాధ, మీరు రెస్పాండ్ అయితే బాగుంటది.
Thank you. And Anantu, before you formally close it, I have to thank you for calling me Uma Garu. I was waiting to be called Uma Garu, and nobody called me Uma Garu. So I'm saying you finally said Uma Garu.
I called you Uma Garu. How are you?
చక్రవర్తి గారు, నేను ఇంతకు ముందే మీరు మీ చాట్ బాక్స్ లో రాశారని నేను ఎక్స్ప్లెయిన్ చేశాను. మీరు చెంచల్గూడ అనుభవాన్ని తను రాయవలసింది అని మీరు చెప్పారని నేను చెప్పాను ఆల్రెడీ, మీరు మాట్లాడకుండా చెప్పారు. విద్మహే గారు, కాచాని విద్మహే గారు మాట్లాడుతున్నారు. మీరు అన్మ్యూట్ చేయండి, వాయిస్ అన్మ్యూట్ చేయండి. విద్మహే కాచాని.
హలో.
yes, you are audible now.
హలో, అందరికీ నమస్తే అండి. నాకు అనురాధను చూడడం, అనురాధ కథల ట్రాన్స్లేషన్ గురించి ఇంతమంది దేశం మీద ఉన్న వాళ్ళందరూ మాట్లాడడం వినడం చాలా బాగుంది. తెలుగులో కథలు చదివినవే నేను, చాలా కదిలించినటువంటివి. అయితే ఇప్పుడు ఇదంతా వింటున్నప్పుడు నాకు అనిపించడం ఏంటంటే, ఒకటి అరుణ్ రివేరా లాగా తన ఎక్స్పీరియన్స్ కూడా రాయాలి అని, అట్లాగే ఇప్పుడు చెంచల్గూడ జైలు అనుభవాలు కూడా తను రాయాలని ఉన్నది. అనురాధని చూడడం వినడం చాలా సంతోషం కలిగించింది. చాలా ఇంట్రెస్టింగ్ గా ఉంది. మొదటి నుంచి ఉమా చక్రవర్తి గారిని చాలా రోజులైంది చూసి, ఎన్నో ఏళ్ల క్రితం ఆవిడ చూడడం వినడం, మిమ్మల్ని అందరినీ కలవడం చాలా బాగుంది. థ్యాంక్
యూ. Shall we close then, Anantu?
Yeah, I think so. It's nobody is rising nor responding.
Thank you very much. Thank you all of you for connecting, and I hope there'll be more books of this kind, and that we'll have more occasions of this kind. Thank you all for being here.